I guess one comment I'd make to that is it's an industry that clearly values open, non-proprietary, interoperable mechanisms. And there's a natural conflict there with having invention, with having something that's innovative. The classic example in this industry is the power plug on the wall. That's a common interface. It hasn't changed in a long time. And again, it's reusable, we can use it. But there's been no innovation in a power plug in a long time. And so this is sort of the pull of we want interoperability, but not to the point of not having innovation. But you would see in a lot of these systems, there's a variety of metrology, comms infrastructures, head-end systems, meter data management, and you can just work your way through the whole enterprise. It's very rare to see a one supplier does all implementation.
I'm just going to make a comment only because I don't compete with these folks, but certainly, from our perspective, being able to share, common things amongst the different, platforms that we see. For example, in the security event monitoring, if we just pick one area of where we need, more standardization, more definition, in terms of, what are the events of interest, how should the events be formatted, how do we present those events, how do we, use those in a secure fashion, is an area that we tend to focus on and try to help these organizations where, they're providing that information, but they're not necessarily digesting that information and making intelligent, making that information accessible to the end users in a fashion that they can benefit from it. So, that's how we sort of cooperate with these different organizations and helping them understand that part of the security, problem.
Well, great, thank you.
Hey, Mike, I guess to the panel, I just couldn't let this pass up, but if you can take a quick question, because in the pen test session, Robert kind of said, hey, if something was found, I wouldn't want, to go tell Ed's customers about it. So this co-opetition thing where there's the same kind of components being shared seems to be contradictory to that.
Not at all. Because if a customer has an Itron component and an Elster component and a Landis component or even a Silver Spring component, they're my customer. And therefore, it's incumbent upon me to inform them of any deficiencies in our system. So the only time that particular statement would come into play would be if it were a purely Itron system or a purely Elster system. And I can't say that won't happen. I can't say that all systems will be homogeneous or all systems will be heterogeneous. I think I pronounced that correctly. Probably not. The point being, though, that each of us as a manufacturer is going to take care of the customers who use our components, whether from the smallest part to a complete system. We're going to take the approach of notifying our customers anytime it becomes necessary.
Yeah, and maybe to Mike's point, I mean, I think everybody on this panel has an open posture with their customers. We're sharing the vulnerabilities in our products with all of our customers. It's not a, I don't think that's really maybe as big an issue. We can create a hypothetical, I suppose. But,
no, the question really was, if I remember the panel right, is would you share that with your competitor in that case, even though it's a component that's shared that you both use?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that would be a definite yes. Okay, it doesn't, while people may think, well, it benefits me to hold back this information if I find a problem with a comm module from Elster or a head end from Landis and Gear, it doesn't benefit me any bit because of the fact that my meter may be sitting on that network. Okay, I mean, I have come from other industries where we have done the analysis on a competitor product. Okay. And then after it was all said and done, and you've gotten, wow, we found this nice little bug, this nice little denial of service in their system. An engineer actually said, well, we can just hold on to this and use it as a competitive advantage. And the look on your face was, I remember my face was like, what are you, nuts? I mean, the first thing we're going to do is write a letter, an email to them and get a phone call with them and tell them that they've got a problem, okay? it does me no good, because if I screw them, I also screw myself.
Yeah, and in terms of subcomponents, I mean, we have real-world examples with the Zigbee devices. So that's something we've all talked openly in open forums about, and shared that information as that came to light.
No, it's good these channels exist. I think actually this panel helped clarify a question from the earlier one. Thanks.
I think to that point that Ito made, when I first started becoming interested in smart grid, the meter on the side of my house says Landis and Gear on it. But the card, the communications card in my meter is Silver Springs Network. If there's a security problem, and I find out as a consumer, I'm going to blame Landis and Gear, even if it's with the network card. So it's really in your best interest for you to sort of share that information, because again, the consumer may not know the difference. Most people, even to this day, when I explain to them, you know, just because the meter says Landis and Gear doesn't mean it's all Landis and Gear. Or Itron.
To that point, as I said before, where there are a mixture of components, it's completely appropriate to share the information, but I certainly wouldn't expect either Ed or Steve to share with me information about a component that's not shared. Yeah. If there's a system in place that they use this component over here only and it's never mixed with an Itron system, I certainly wouldn't expect to hear about it. And I would expect the converse to be true. The point is that something to keep in mind with security issues, a security issue that becomes public and impacts one manufacturer impacts the entire industry. So if we do something stupid, it reflects poorly on our competitors as well. So part of the reason that we've figured out how to cooperate as closely as we have as compared to, say, the big three in Detroit, I try and put a 446 pack into a Camaro once. It doesn't work very well, is because the work of one reflects upon the work of all.
Yeah, and there was an earlier discussion talking about what can we learn from banking and retail and ID cards, which are all industries I come from. And I've struggled with this question for years. Something that occurred to me this morning was there is a common aggregation point for vulnerabilities found. There's a common aggregation point for rules and for certification, let's say in banking, which would be Visa or MasterCard. So the smaller banks, the credit unions, the larger banks, they're still going to listen to Visa's rules on privacy. So maybe you've heard of KISS compliance. This isn't something that the banks came up with. This was something that the card associations came up with. And in that spirit, we've been doing it somewhat organically, and I think, again, this is one of those areas where the Cybersecurity Working Group in NIST has really helped out, because it's given us a natural aggregation point. But one of the important lessons in that industry was having those coalescence points instead of, if you go back 30 years and you were trying to take a pin pad and get it certified, you went around and did, I think it was like 15 different certification programs to get a pin pad certified. I don't think that's something that we're going to do. We're not appear to be repeating that lesson. I think this idea of sharing information is already happening somewhat organically, and then also with the encouragement in NIST.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, one of the things about press, we've all seen, some of us cringing, some bad press about how all smart meters are insecure. We hope you have a better understanding of why that might not necessarily be a fair or accurate statement, not least because not all of these devices are the same. Not all the manufacturers are represented up here either. It's probably worthwhile to also note that when, it's an example I used just the other day in a side conversation, but when an airplane crashes, they'll say, oh, it's a Boeing something or other that crashed, and the cause was engine failure, for example, just to choose a hypothetical. Not many people outside the industry are aware that actually the engine for an airliner is actually chosen by the buyer, by the airline. So the engine isn't really typically a Boeing engine. It'll be a Pratt & Whitney engine, or it'll be a Rolls-Royce engine. But what's splashed on the headline, Boeing plane crashes. We kind of have a similar sort of thing, I think, happening here. It's disheartening to note that commercial aviation has been around for how many years now, and that differentiation still is not made in headlines, so I'm not sure we're going to fare any better as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the headlines, the thing at the end of the day, you know, all of these products, you know, the consumer or the purchaser, the owner of these assets are the ones that really ultimately are responsible, right? I mean, we could spend 100 years trying to make it perfect, and at the end of the day, it's still going to be vulnerable to something with intent. But, you know, if the consumers of these products don't do the right thing with them, then of course they're going to be compromised. And so, you know, that's the thing that, you know, at the end of the day we have to hold accountable, is the people that are putting these in place, who are configuring them, who are securing them, who are maintaining them, and hold them accountable, not necessarily the vendors. The vendors are doing the best that they possibly can with today's technology.
Well, on that note, security is indeed a very dynamic environment, and AMI security has been forced to evolve with this very dynamic environment. What are some areas you believe AMI security has shown some tremendous improvement in? And for those of you willing to answer the question, what are some areas where AMI vendors could be doing better?
Yeah, so I think the journey of the last 3 to 5 years has been one of adding in systemic protections, and I think you've seen a lot of energy and effort into preventing a compromise of one device compromising the system. You've seen a lot of effort put into people and process controls and mitigations. And I think that's where I would give some kudos to the people on the stage and to the industry as a whole. To that same token, that endpoint of what I just mentioned, the train still hasn't arrived. We're still finishing out, in terms of the full industry, adding in the proper systemic mitigations. In my mind, the next step after that, and I know this may be a little controversial, is one of proofs. So certifications, auditability, a security maturity assessment for the smart grid. I think that is not just the vendors, but as an industry, we have to get to where we can have some way to have a conversation about what level of security is being provided by the system as it's deployed and by the vendors individually.
Well, if that is a controversial topic, I'm going to go out on a limb and agree with you.
Oh, beautiful.
And, yeah, actually, I think that's right. I'm not sure what the actual venue is, whether it's certification or not, but certainly, if I were a utility buyer of this equipment, or if I were a regulator who has to try to help make sure that these systems, as deployed, are really secure, I would want some means by which I don't have to go through the exercise of an exhaustive test myself to figure out whether this is really secure or not quite secure or complete garbage. And right now, I don't think there certainly isn't a very easy way to differentiate among those possibilities. That, I think, is one of the ways in which we could probably improve collectively, with the help of our utility buyers, to make sure that we get in place what it is that would be most useful to you. Things have definitely come a long way as far as, you know, hearing things like the kinds of testing that people are now doing. I guess on this panel, I've probably been around in the metering end of things for the longest, and it has definitely changed, say, in the last decade or so. If I think back to what we were doing as an industry 10 years ago and where it is now, there's a market improvement.
I think that the biggest change that we've seen to date from the time I entered the industry, and I entered the industry as a security assessment person, and from that time till now, awareness. Awareness of a need to actually have security, a losing the attitude of, that happens to the other guy, it doesn't happen to me, it doesn't happen to our utility, it doesn't happen to our meter. The growth in the development teams, understanding the difference between a meter that simply stands there alone, and in order to compromise it, you have to physically go and touch each meter. Well, in a situation like that, it's less inappropriate to have a single password throughout an entire system. When you've networked all these things together, it's wildly inappropriate to have the same password in every meter. And watching the manufacturers and the utilities move from that isolated security model to a contiguous security model has been really something fascinating to watch. And I think going forward, I'm really going to go out on a limb here, Stephen, and agree with you as well.
That was controversial.
There we go.
Yeah, you know, he did it first.
They play so nicely together, don't they?
I'll be the white sheep of the family.
Yeah, and maybe the point that this concept of certification, you know, this is the one that usually gets a lot of
Yeah.
pushback, right?
Yeah, that's the one where I'll argue with you.
There
but
you go.
Metrics. How about we can
Yeah,
agree at
measure.
metrics?
What's the measure?
I think that the challenge going forward along with metrics is the continuing education of the business professionals. I go back to the comment that I made about ROI. You know, security doesn't have an ROI until it's broken, and then it's a negative ROI. So helping our executives to understand that there is value in including security, that it is a business need. Well, that's been driven by the customers. The customers said, we want security. We said, okay, you can have security. Our customers understanding that need from their customers, from the consumers, and the concerns surrounding privacy and surrounding the ability of the system to stay up and recover. The public is becoming more and more aware of these things, and that's driving the utilities to address the problems. So I think that continuing education of the providers and the consumers is going to be one of the key issues for the next 3 to 5 years.